A massive welcome to all our Francophone viewers and really everyone tuning in from around the globe for today's explainer. I am so excited for this one because today we're diving into something that is literally earth-shattering. We're unpacking an absolutely staggering 800 billion pound mega project that is quite literally rewriting the geographic map of Egypt. It's a masterclass in massive infrastructure management and honestly, a modern engineering miracle. We are talking about turning vast, barren stretches of sand right into the beating heart of national development. Just to wrap our heads around the sheer scale here, for thousands of years, Egyptian civilization basically relied almost exclusively on a narrow green strip hugging the historic Nile River, right? Well, this new reclamation project is designed to expand the nation's entire cultivable agricultural footprint by a whopping 30%, and in just a few short years. We are talking about permanently pushing the flow of life deep into the Western desert. Okay, let's dive into this. The big question we really have to ask is, how on earth do you engineer a thriving agricultural and industrial miracle out of entirely barren sand? Seriously, how do you take such a harsh, unforgiving environment and stimulate incredible national growth, creating thousands of jobs and brand new industrial zones where there once absolutely nothing? To make sense of this massive endeavor, we're going to break it down into 5 key pillars. We'll look at the desert economic hub, then we'll tackle the water challenge, defying gravity, literally, then food security, followed by jobs and new generations, and finally, wrap it up with the public-private partnership.
Starting things off with Pillar 1, the Desert Economic Hub, building an entire economy right out of the sand.
You see, this isn't just about, planting a few seeds in the desert and hoping for the best. It's about reclaiming 2.2 million acres of completely arid land. And the strategic placement here is brilliant. They've situated this enormous expanse right next to major logistics arteries. Think dry ports, the Sphinx Airport, the Alexandria Desert Road, specifically to seamlessly link up farming, food processing, and export markets. The contrast between the past and the future is it's wild. The old Delta was basically a geographic lottery win. It relied on the natural, effortless, gravity-fed flow of the Nile. But the new Delta, it requires completely defying nature. It is heavily pump-driven. It's an absolute triumph of modern mechanical willpower and heavy engineering out in the desert. But to actively stimulate that kind of heavy industrial development, you need an infrastructure backbone that is almost unfathomable. The project includes laying down 12,000 kilometers of new roads. To put that into perspective for a second, that is roughly 1.6 times the entire width of the African continent. Literally, this road network is absolutely crucial because smart, heavy infrastructure management is what actually stimulates national growth. It allows all that labor, heavy equipment, and the massive harvests to move around efficiently. And add to that, a 19,000-kilometer electrical network. That is basically enough wire to make a round trip from Cairo all the way to New York City. By providing this exact rock-solid infrastructural foundation, the state is creating the ultimate plug-and-play environment. Private industries can just come in, set up shop, and thrive without having to sweat the basic utilities.
Which brings us right to Pillar 2, defying gravity. The monumental water challenge.
Because look, you can build all the roads and power lines in the world, but to bring life to 2.2 million acres of sand, you have to physically move an artificial river completely against the laws of gravity. Tracing the exact journey of this 170-kilometer artificial river really reveals an engineering marvel. Step 1 pulls the water from a colossal intake station at the Rosetta branch of the Nile. Step 2 violently forces that water through sprawling, large-diameter pipeline networks. Step 3, it flows into the massive Tahaya Msir open canal. And finally, Step 4 delivers this life-giving water to its ultimate destination deep in the western desert along the Dubai axis. Now, what's really fascinating here is the sheer mechanical complexity required to make this happen without totally disrupting existing cities. It is staggering. They built 10 massive subterranean crossing tunnels just to safely bypass existing railways and highways. And to deal with the severe elevation changes out in the desert terrain, they constructed 30 giant lift stations. They essentially act like a massive relay race, forcefully pushing highly advanced treated agricultural drainage water up steep inclines. We're talking about pumping between 7 and 10 million cubic meters of water every single day. All right, that leads us perfectly into Pillar 3. Food security and agriculture. How to feed 110 million people. So why go through all this crazy effort? Well, the core purpose is strategically insulating a population of 110 million people against global food supply chain shocks. The government knows that absolute 100% self-reliance isn't really possible, but smart agricultural infrastructure can drastically minimize import reliance.
And making this high-tech farming oasis work requires what we call a security triangle. It's this highly coordinated effort where the Ministry of Irrigation strictly manages that hard-earned artificial water supply. Then, the Ministry of Agriculture acts as the brain, managing complex soil research and crop yields. And finally, the Ministry of Supplies steps in to secure the actual harvest, safely storing it in millions of tons of newly built strategic silos. It's a completely seamless connection, from a single water drop straight to the dinner table.
The whole strategy here is basically a giant, nationwide optimization puzzle. They're outfitting the desert with state-of-the-art closed pipelines to prevent evaporation. Then they take crops like sugar beets, which surprisingly absolutely thrive in these new desert lands, and grow them there. This brilliantly frees up the super fertile historic clay of the old delta to maximize domestic wheat production. So it's all about putting the exact right crop in the exact right soil.
Moving on to Pillar 4, Jobs and New Generations. A massive socioeconomic victory. So, how do all these massive, heavy engineering feats actually translate into direct, life-changing benefits for the local population? Well, the dynamic expansion of the agricultural sector alone generated 1.3 million new jobs. By doing so, it actively acted as a primary driver in bringing the national unemployment rate down to an incredibly impressive 6%. Thousands of workers were directly employed just to build the tunnels and canals, which drastically stimulated the local economy.
But the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that these are not just temporary construction gigs. The goal is permanence. This project directly benefits future farmers by providing over 2 million stable, year-round livelihoods. They aren't just handing people a plot of sand, they're building comprehensive communities complete with schools, healthcare facilities, and integrated industrial zones. This actively encourages young farming families, the new generations, to permanently settle in these rural, newly green regions, literally changing the demographic map of the entire country.
And finally, Pillar 5, the public-private partnership, the economic engine driving the future.
Look, you simply cannot sustain a project of this magnitude without a fascinating hybrid economic model, one where the state acts as a supportive umbrella for over 150 private farming firms to actually get down to work. This massive partnership is built in 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 sees the state building that colossal infrastructure and cutting through all the red tape. Then, in Phase 2, the state actively supports these private firms, especially when things get tough economically. And Phase 3 is the ultimate exit scenario. Once the foundation is fully laid, the government plans to sell off its shares, partially or fully, through the stock market. They take that initial capital, step back, and reinvest it into brand new development areas, fully trusting the private sector to take the wheel.
This brilliantly illustrates a highly unique protective dynamic. When global economic crises hit, the state steps in to support struggling private agricultural businesses rather than enforcing aggressive financial haircuts. It goes to show that the government's role here is to be an engine of growth. They're focused on sustaining the project's long-term legacy alongside the private sector rather than trying to, conquer or monopolize the market.
Zooming out for just a second, this artificial river system is actually part of a much larger 2-pronged national strategy. While the new delta reclaims 2.2 million acres up in the north, the Tashka South expansion is reclaiming another 1.1 million acres. Together, that is 3.3 million acres of newly fertile land carved directly out of the harsh desert, which drastically insulates the country's food supply.
Which leaves us with this final, monumental question to consider. As we witness this massive geographic rewrite in real time, permanently shifting the historic Nile into the deep desert, we have to wonder, will this bold blend of heavy state infrastructure, massive job creation, and dynamic private farming become the ultimate global blueprint for conquering the desert? The sheer scale of human ingenuity on display here proves that when necessity truly demands it, we can literally move rivers. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. And as always, keep learning.